Okay, welcome everybody. Today we are going to get stuck into a little bit of data and analytics, get you guys up and running a little bit from that perspective, and sort of see how it goes. We're sort of just testing the waters here. We just want to, teach you guys some a couple of new skills, and engage with you guys and together establish a really decent data set to obviously feed the algorithm. So what we are going to do is we're going to do a little bit of touch on a program called Power BI. Now, for those of you who do not know or are brand new to the world of data analytics, there is a couple of steps and stages in how data moves through. Now, me myself personally, what I do on a day-to-day basis is I am a data warehouse developer slash business intelligence developer. And what that basically means is I am the guy that develops databases in SQL, and I am the guy who takes very raw data. And when we're looking at raw data, it's really data in a nonsensical form in terms of when you're having a look at the data, it really doesn't make much sense in its current form. So I'm that guy that basically takes the data in a raw sense into a SQL database, and I will manipulate that data and make it tell a story, because that's what data is all about. And I will take that data and I will ultimately turn that data into something that actually feeds businesses with ideas, and helps them identify shortfalls in the way that their business currently is currently working. Now, um, I have been doing this for the past eight years now, developing data warehouses and databases and manipulating data. And I love it. It's really is something that I really truly enjoy, and there's a very big market for it out there. And there's a lot of skills development out on the web that can assist anybody who is maybe interested in going this route. I really do feel like it is a great route to go. It is a route that you would need to keep working at and keep learning new skills, but it's very challenging, and I truly do believe it is. I wouldn't say fully future proof. I don't think any job is fully future proof, but it is really good in terms of the high priority requirements. So we just decided maybe once a week we could put out one of these videos for you guys, and teach you something new, something that maybe you guys are brand new to. And like I said in the beginning, there's a couple of different steps and stages, but I'm going to actually start at the end stage, and that is the data visualization stage. That is where you take data that has been manipulated and drafted together, and you make it look pretty, you make it tell a story, you actually investigate the data that you are basically feeding. And that is what we're going to do a little bit of today. It's a massive field, but I want to touch on this, and I want to maybe give you guys a little bit of insight as to how these things operate. And who knows, maybe I get a new data person out of this at the end of the day, and I will definitely put myself out there. And if you guys do want anything, you've got any questions at any time, whether you're watching this live with us or you're joining us for a little bit of a later stage, just drop your questions in the comments there. Please do make sure that you do subscribe and hit the notification bell, but please do drop your questions in the comments there, and I will reply and get back to you guys as I can. And let's maybe build something great together here, and teach you guys a couple of new skills. All right, so like I mentioned, I am going to start with the visualization layer of business intelligence. And what this is basically using your data to tell a story to assist a business in becoming more proactive in the way that they function in their day to day. All right, as well as also foreseeing possible issues down the line and potentially predicting when something is actually going to go over. Now, our focus on this journey is obviously going to be sports analytics data. It is the data that I am the most passionate about. I currently work within the fintech environment, which is the financial technology sector, which encompasses banking, insurance, anything financial related is where I currently do sit. But my true passion lies in sports analytics data, as I'm sure most of us do have that passion. All right, so the tool that we are going to basically be using over here is called Microsoft Power BI. Now, Microsoft Power BI, if you download the desktop version, it is free for you guys to play around with, muck around with exactly what we are going to be doing over here. Obviously, if you want to do some of the more advanced stuff in terms of building along with a team and being able to let multiple people check in and out and add comments to dashboards and data, then obviously you do need sort of corporate licensing. But we're not about that. We want to learn something new. We want to play around with some stuff, and you can download the Power BI desktop app and do everything that we are doing. The only thing that would be different in what we are doing here is our data that sits behind our dashboards that we are going to build. And the reason why that is slightly different is due to the fact that it's obviously our intellectual property in terms of our algorithm that obviously sits and kicks out the specific data that we are going to be dealing with today. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to first navigate around Power BI, give you guys a little bit of navigation knowledge, and then we're just going to throw together a few visualizations today, not too many, and then we will check back in next week, and based on the basis that we set and the foundation that we set today, we will check back in next week and we will build on to this dashboard and explore the data that we do currently have. Okay, so the data that we do want to do and the question that we want to answer when it comes to the data is how truly effective is the Predict Heroes algorithm that you guys do see on the website, the predict-heroes.com. All right, so we're going to dive into that, but first of all, I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of navigation. All right, for anybody who Power BI is brand new to. All right, and just by the way, there are plenty of these tools out there. The ones that I've got a lot of knowledge on is obviously Power BI, ClickSense, ClickView, Tableau is another one. I've had 3-4 years experience with a tool called oh goodness, now I've actually forgotten the name. It was a framework as such that we used to work on. The name will come to me. I will get it shortly. But basically, um, there's a whole bunch and array of these tools, but generally they all kind of function and work the same. All right, so in terms of navigation, we've obviously got general navigation that we do have running along the top over here, where we've just got our normal file explorer. This is just like your Windows and your Word. Um, Davis, I'm just going to turn up my volume a little bit for you. Please do just bear with me there quickly. I will turn that up for you so that the volume is slightly better. I do hope that does help you a little bit there. Sean, how's it going? Always good to have you on board. All right. Okay, so we're going to continue. Hopefully the volume is a lot higher now, a little bit better. So we're just going to continue with a couple of the navigations over here. So having a look up the top, we do have our home, which in essence just basically has our general data connection, so we can basically connect to multiple different data sets. So we do have, like I mentioned earlier, SQL servers. Now SQL is the programming language that databases use. We do have our text or CSV files. We can connect to web. We can connect to Excel, which most of everyone is used to. Excel with the columns and the rows. And then we've got things a little bit more advanced like OData feeds. Now what an OData feed is it's a webhook, which basically means that you pass it a URL that contains data behind it, and you are basically able to do a call to that O data, and that will basically return data in an XML format. I'm not going to touch too much on that. We'll maybe get into that stuff a little bit later, depending on the questions that do get raised. But yeah, just to give you a bit of an insight. All right, then obviously we've got the ability to transform data. Now, as soon as you hear the word transforming in data analytics, what transform basically means is that you're going to take data and potentially you're going to pivot that data. So basically you would take data that's sitting in rows and you would push that into columns or vice versa. Refresh obviously refreshes your underlying data set. So if you do have a live data set, for example, something like a SQL Server that's directly plugged in, you would be able to refresh that data set over there in order to obviously pull the latest and live data. New visuals, self-explanatory, and new measure and quick measure we'll touch in a bit later as we get through the data sets. Right, over onto the insert side, we can insert new pages, new visuals, a couple of Q&As, just a few little general stuff. If you want text boxes, etc., you can do all of that stuff from up here. It's very, very nice. What I do like and prefer about Power BI to a lot of the other tools is I find that the Power BI is far more friendly in terms of editing. So a lot of the dashboard designers only allow you to drag the visuals that I'll go through shortly now on. However, Power BI does actually allow for you to add things like text boxes and images, and you can embed buttons behind images. You know, you can really make this very nice, and I really do encourage you guys, if data is something that you guys are keen on, please do download Power BI, and I'll point you in the direction of a couple of nice data sets, and you guys can just go and have some fun, and any questions you're welcome just to ask, and I will get you the answers for them. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to run through a few little general layouts. Okay, so in the middle over here we do obviously have our page. Down the side we do have specific filters that you can add on the page if you want to filter out a specific element, and I'll show you some of that just now. As well as if you want to add a filter that runs across all your different pages. And you will notice down the bottom here that I do have a few pages that I have built a few visuals on. They look horrible at the moment, but they look horrible for a reason, because I want to do some styling on them with you guys later. All right, so first up, one of the big things that I always do when I'm looking at a new data set, and just to give you guys an understanding, my data set sits down the side over here. All right, and if we really did want to go and we wanted to give this a rename, we could call this predict heroes data, whatever the data set, whatever makes sense to whoever is using it. And you can see here that I've got a whole bunch. This is all the columns that I have in a Excel sheet that I've just exported out of a database, just to get some nice data that we can really work with, to start actually having a look in here. All right, so let's start with the visuals. Okay, so you've got a couple of visuals here, and if you just hover over each one, it will obviously give you the name of each specific one. Now, there's a lot of visuals that you probably will never end up using. However, there are very important ones. So one example that if ever I want to check my data and I want to understand what exactly is in my data over here, what I do is I start with a table, and I will specifically Franklin, just to give you a bit of an understanding of what exactly we're doing here. So we've decided just once a week, we are together with whoever would like to join. We're going to give you guys some introductions into data analytics, sports data analytics, for that specific purpose, to maybe help anybody who's maybe looking to go into a data analytics field. I really do believe this is a truly powerful field to be in. Like I said, I've been in it for the past 8 years now, and I really do enjoy it. So what we're basically doing is just teaching a new skill to anybody who would like to learn it, and we're using Power BI to do exactly that. All right, so what I've done is I've just dragged on a table, just a general table, just because I want to understand what is in my data on the side over here. So I do have the option to have search bars up here. So let's start with a couple of things. So let's start with the event date. Right. So what I do is I drag on the event date into my values on my table. Okay, and that will basically go and populate. Now you will see here that it populates it in a hierarchy type of way, and if you specifically maybe wanted it in the format of um, a just the standard date, you can change it by right clicking onto the event date and changing it to event date. But if you do like that hierarchy, you can also change it to the hierarchy, which basically goes and splits that out a year, quarter, month, and day. But for this purpose, we're just going to stick with event date. All right, and you can see here the data that we are dealing with does check back to 2021. So we're dealing with just over 12 months worth of data. All right, one thing that I would like to actually do is I would like to add a nice filter onto this dashboard. And what we do is there is the option for a slicer, but there is also a couple of other options over here. But let's use the slicer in the first event. I'm just going to take that back to the table, click elsewhere because I would like to add a slicer up to the top. All right, and we're going to drag event date onto our slicer over here as well, and we want this to basically affect the rest of the report. Okay, so what we're going to do here is if, for example, I want to drag this on and I just want to basically make this, let's just make this for uh, the one day, March the 21st, okay, over here, and you can actually see what it does to my data over here. Now, there is two ways to actually do data filtering, and this is a very, very key point. There's two ways to do data filtering. All right, either you can do data filtering in the report. So what that means is that the report in the background has all of the data, and you slice the data like we've just done over here. Or, for example, the other option is to actually limit the data that comes in. Now, the benefit of limiting the data prior is that your data set is a lot faster and it amends a lot quicker within the job. Or otherwise, if you do the slicing over here, you will see that the data itself, you still got access to the full data. However, we do visually filter the data, as we can see over here. All right, so now how these tables work is that they span out. Okay, what I mean by that, the 21st of March is one day. It will never change. It's always going to be one day. However, if I start adding things like, let me just make this slightly bigger so that I can actually see them. If I start adding let's just see, do I have, I think I've called it home name. Let's see if we can get the home team's name. As you can see, I've got an awful lot of data in here. There we go. All right, so I want to add home name in here. Okay, and I'm going to also add the away name, for example. And remember, what we're doing here is just very, very crude. I'm just giving you an idea of how the data actually functions. Right, so now you can see what's happened to the 21st of March is it's obviously spanned out because now you've got a many-to-one relationship. And what a many-to-one relationship means is that there was one single date, but there's multiple games underneath this. So whenever anybody talks about a many-to-one, it basically means that there's many-to-one. All right, so now what would happen if I move the slicer out a little bit? Okay, it's obviously going to increase the number of games because all of a sudden we have a whole lot more data in here. All right, so we're just going to focus in on this. And if we wanted to check something like, I don't know, let's have a look at the home team score. Potentially you want to add the score in here. Whoopsie, you see what happens when I added it to the slicer there. You need to obviously be on the specific thing that you want to add it, the specific element. And we've got the score here. And let's just add the home score as well. Like I said, what we're doing here is nonsense data. But at the end of the day, what we are doing is we just want to understand what this data is that we are looking at. Okay, because many times you get a requirement from business and business will tell you, I want to see, all games that happened on specific days. I want to be able to separate by the days, and I want to check the scores, etc. So you don't know what the columns are called down the side. So always create a table, drag the stuff into the table so that you can actually visualize what the data looks like, and then you A for away. Then you can actually go and you can start building some stuff. Okay, so in terms of how things can work here, you can obviously order by things like home name. You can order by the score lines, etc. You can even go as far as doing some conditional formatting on a specific field as well. Let's take, for example, if you wanted to see, so let's say home team score. You can see here what it's done is it's summed them all up. What if we want to maybe see the average? What is the average over here? So we just go to the home team score, we click on the little drop down, and we have the option for the average, and we can see here that the average for the 21st of March for these games was 1.16 goals. Okay, so that's just a little bit of tinkering around with what exactly it looks like. And what we can maybe do is maybe we can see the count of how many home teams scored 0 goals, 1 goal, 2 goals, etc. Maybe we want to plot that in a bar chart. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're just going to check over here, and I just want to find a nice chart that can work for us. Let's just see here. We can maybe go with a clustered chart. Sorry, apologies. I need to click off onto the main page. Right, so now what's happening is this chart expects an axis, a legend, some values, some multiples if you really wanted to get a little bit intricate with them. Okay, and what we're basically going to do over here is maybe I want to plot how many teams had 1 goal, 2 goals, 3 goals, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the home team score. Okay, let's drag it onto the axis and see exactly where the axis goes, and I'm going to drag it onto values as well. Okay, and what we're actually seeing over here is we see, and if I do this, what we can see here is that we have 1, 2, and 3, and a 0 over here. Okay, now what exactly is this telling us? This is telling us a sum. Okay, now if I did a sum on something like this, it means nothing because obviously the sum of 0 is going to be 0. But if I did some counts, I can see that there was 5 home teams that scored 0 goals on this day. There was 9 teams with 1 goal, 2 teams with 2, and 3 teams with 3. Okay, so very, very simple, very straightforward. Maybe I want to expand this. Maybe I want to see. Now, what you're starting to see is that you're starting to see a little bit of a curve. Now, what this basically starts to show you in terms of data, this starts to actually show you guys where does the distribution sit. And we can see that 1 goal on average for this period was the one that stood out, followed by 0, followed by 2 goals. Okay, now let's maybe take this a little bit further. Okay, I'm going to add another slicer in on this data set. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I am going to add a category. Okay, now my categories in my data is countries. Okay, we can see over here, and I just want to fiddle with these quickly, and we just want to sort axis. Okay, that's just going to go and sort that. Right, but let's just scroll through a few of these. I'm actually going to, I tell you what, I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to put it under a filter because I'd prefer to show you how the filter works. Right, so let's filter on this page. Okay, and you can see here that I can access all of my countries that form part of the data that sits in my table and in my graph. Okay, if I had to filter, for example, on Australia, I can see that Australia's highest on home team is averaging around that 1 goal perspective. If maybe I went to Belgium, I can see that it is far more flatter between the zeros, the ones, and the twos. Okay, so what this ultimately means is that I can now start to check not an overall data because each league is different, and let's go down to leagues that we know, the likes of England, okay, and the likes of Germany. Okay, so now we're starting to see Germany. Now, what about if I want to see potentially What if I want to see some tournaments and I actually would like to see the Bundesliga only? All right, because we don't want the likes of a um, what do you call it, a uh, Bundesliga 2 affecting the data that we are seeing over here. Right, so now what I can do is I can actually filter by Bundesliga. Now, one thing that I would like you guys to see over here, can you see that the tournament name only has the German leagues? The reason why I've only got the German leagues is because I selected Germany up the top here. Okay, so each filter hurdles against each filter. Now, what I can see, if I take out Bundesliga, I'm seeing a little bit more flat and a little bit more inclination towards the zero side. As soon as I start looking at Bundesliga, what I'm seeing is that the 1 and 2 goals starts to actually stand. So what that means is that there's higher goal opportunities that occur within the Bundesliga within the date parameters that we are going. Franklin, I do respect that it is confusing, and that is why we are going to run you guys through this a couple of times and just build some stuff together. So okay, so how did I input those games? Now that is a very good question. So what happens is my data that I'm feeding over here, my fields over here, this is connected to a Excel sheet that I exported out of the Predict Heroes database. So what happens every single day, and we will touch on this later, but I'll just give you guys a brief rundown. Every single day, what I do is I've got a job that goes and scans some websites and takes the data that I'm getting fetching from those websites, and I'm writing it into a database for my Predict Heroes data, and then all of my algorithm runs through that and obviously kicks out what we see on the Predict Heroes website. Now what you are seeing over here is an export out of my database, which just contains games. So what we're seeing over here is actual games. So for example, if you had to go to the 29th of October 2021 and you had to go and check the Hoffenheim versus Hertha Berlin game, you would see that we have, and I think we have a 2-0 win in favor of Hoffenheim. Okay, so the data that we do have over here, it's literally just an Excel sheet that we've exported out of our database that contains games for a very long period of time, 2 years, well, a year and a bit to be precise. Okay, so ultimately at the end of the day, to sum it up, this is plugged onto a simple Excel sheet that contains past football games with their results. All right, so what we can see over here is that we can see that the Bundesliga for Germany, we do have a nice leaning closer towards that too. But now what happens if I actually want to check only for the likes of Bayern Munich, for example? Right, so what do? Again, it's a filter. So we're going to take the home name onto my filter, and what's going to happen here, it's not going to sort all teams out here. What it's ultimately going to do, because we've already got filters on Germany and Bundesliga, it's now only going to populate this with the likes of the teams that actually affect. Now look at this for Bayern. Now this is a crazy stat. This is a crazy stat, okay? And this is what I love about data. All right, because right now Bayern, for the period of time from the 28th of October till the 19th of March 2022, when Bayern are at home, they have never not scored a goal. Okay, now I know the odds on something like that are very small. We all know, for example, Bayern to score are always a lot higher, but a Bayern over zero point 0.5 was achieved 100% of the time over the past 6 months. Now that's massive. Now that is massive, because even though those odds are small, it is a great thing to actually see and experience. Okay, if we had to go and have a look maybe at the likes of Borussia Dortmund, all right, we can see some really great results as well. Dortmund never not scored at home in 25 games for the club within this time period as well. Okay, so there is a lot of different aspects and ratios to football and the way that things do actually work, but the underlying data is what it is. We have a home team, an away team. We've got a league. We've got home goals. We've got away goals. We've got corners earned, corners conceded. We've got cards earned, cards conceded. We've got refs. How many cards do the refs give? How many cards does a specific player get? And all of these factors come into play when you're having a look at such a data set. All right, so what we're going to do now is I would like to maybe move on. And just after now, I've given you guys just a brief overview of what we can do. And I mean, this thing's very, very powerful. You've got cards, you've got gauges, you've got pie charts, you've got everything that you can visualize in here. The ability within Power BI is there. Okay, now I want to answer a question that is very, very important. And the only way for me to answer this question, and the reason why I have all of you with me right now, is because I had a question. I had a question, and it's a question that I ask myself constantly. I have a question saying that personally, I want to know how effective my algorithm is. That's question one. Okay, how effective is the Predict Heroes algorithm? If I give you guys stats and I say to you, there's an 83% chance of this coming off. How accurate is that 83% chance? Is that 83% chance 96% accurate? Is it maybe 50% accurate? And what that basically means is how many times when an event states that it is 83% accurate, how many times is that actually does that come off? Okay, because if I'm just feeding you guys percentages and I'm telling you it's 83% accurate, meanwhile at the back at the ranch it's actually 50% of the time that it's 83% it comes off. That's not very good. Okay, because that means that I'm skewing the data in such a way. So that was my question one. How truly effective is the Predict Heroes algorithm and accurate? Okay, and question two is, and this is a very, very important one, especially for me as a developer, if I make changes to the underlying data and underlying algorithm, what effect does that have? Or what effect will that have for you guys going forward? So what that basically means is I'm not sitting here thumb sucking and going, okay, if I make a change to, let's say, the number of games. So there's two parts to the algorithm. I look at past games and I look at form. So let's take form. Do I look at the past 7 games? Do I look at the past 5? Do I look at the past 3? Do I look at the past 2? What exactly do I need to look at to get the best result out of the algorithm? Okay, now the only way to test that is to use historical data and be able to determine what it would have looked like at that point if I make such a change to the data. Right, so there's my two questions. My first question is how effective? And my second question is if I make changes, what would happen? Okay, and that's the beauty of data. I am able to backtest all of my algorithms in order to get the best out of them. And I'm constantly doing that. I'm constantly checking and tweaking and changing and whatnot to better the percentages. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with match outcomes. Okay, like I said to you, this is very, very bland, basic. There was a reason for it because I wanted to make it nice and uh, um, beautify it with you guys and make a couple of color changes, etc. I'm not gonna spend my time making everything beautiful. That we will do in the coming weeks, but I just wanted to give you guys an understanding of what this does. Okay, so what we're having a look at over here, right, is I've just got um, my table of raw data up here. Okay, and in this graph, what this graph is showing me is I have an expected result. Okay, my expected result, and I'm actually going to show you guys a little bit of this. Now, this is what I'm about to show you here is slightly more advanced in terms of the Power BI, what they term DAX. DAX is their calculation tool, right? It's a type of language, not really, but it's kind of a language that they work with. Right. Now, what DAX does is it's basically telling me that I am saying in the event of my percentage, because as you guys know, everything that we do has a percentage. So we have a home win, a draw, and an away win. Right? If the home win percentage is 60%, okay, that's 60% out of 100. The expected result based on the stats is a home win, correct? Yes. All right. In the event that the away win is the highest percentage, the expected result that we have is an away win. All right. And what that basically means is that I always have an expectation based on my stats. I'm never going to have 33.33 across the board. Yes, we've got very close ones, 36 and 32. You guys have seen that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we always have one result that is expected based on the percentage. I will not go and put my money on a game that shows a 60%. Okay, not a chance. I would put my money on a game that maybe shows an 80 and 85% because I feel more confident in that. All right. So what happens is we've just done a quick calculation to basically show is what is the highest percentage? Okay. The highest percentage that comes out, and you can see here, I do a max to show the max between a home win and a draw, and then the max between the result of those two and an away win. That gives me what is the highest percentage for that game. Okay. Then what I basically do is I go and say, right, what is my percentage? So my percentage of 60%, for example, is home win, and then basically return me the home win. All right. So if my expected result percentage of 60% is equal to the home wins percentage, spit out the word home win, draw, or away win, because that's my expectation. That is what my system is expecting to happen. All right. Smaller percentages, whenever, it doesn't matter, but there's always that expectation. Okay. Then what I do is I basically go and say, right, what was the actual result of the game? Was it a home win, was it a draw, or was it a away win? You can only have three results to a game. And yes, I know somebody's gonna come with the smart answer of abandoned, and we exclude all of those. All right, just as a heads up there, we do exclude those. Francis, thank you very, very much. We really are trying to make this as good as possible for everyone because we really do enjoy this as well. Right, so if the expected result does indeed equal the actual result that happened, so I expected a home win and a home win really did happen, then return me a true or a false. Okay, what this graph is showing me over here, okay, we've got blue as false and yellowy orange over here as true. Okay, now when I plug data in like this, okay, these percentages down the bottom here are the percentages that you guys see on the site. So what's happening here is the picture that you, me, and everybody wants to see. Okay, the first question, how truly effective is the algorithm, will be depicted by this graph here. This graph This graph over here, sorry, my headset just decided to die. This graph over here is telling me that the lower the expected percentage on my site is, the higher the chance of a false outcome. So, starting over here at 34%, okay, there was only, of that 34%, only 33% of that was actually correct. And I don't mean 33% out of 34. No, no, no. I mean 33% of the 100% of 34%. Okay, now, in simple terms, what that means, we have 100 games, and of those, we expected 34% of them to be um, home. Okay? Home wins. All right, let's just call it that. Okay, so 100 games, 34 of them were going to basically be home wins. Right, now what the algorithm is actually saying here is that we had that expectation. Right, of that, only 33% out of 34. So basically, only 10 or 11 of the games out of the 34 actually happened the way that is expected. Now, this is highly understandable because we have a very small percentage of probability of this happening. Okay. Now, what I want to see as the algorithm, what I want to see is I want to see this. So basically, the higher the percentage outcome on my website, the higher the higher that it actually won. Okay, so basically over here, when we start having a look around 80% over here, every game that had an outcome of 80% on the website had a 67-65% success rate, hit rate on there. Now we all know with algorithms and odds, you need to maintain a loss ratio of at least 67%, okay, in order for you to be profitable with the bookies. Okay, now that's something that I've hammered in a lot. Okay, it's the same rule of thumb that the guys that do the stock trading, etc., all use. There is a certain percentage that you need to maintain in order for you to be able to win, okay, or to stay profitable. Let's use the word profitable. Franklin, we are going to cut it at about 9:15, and then we will obviously continue next week. All right, so just going to run through the specific graph over here, and then we'll probably call it a night, and then we will pick up where we left off next week. Okay, all right, so basically getting back here, what I can see over here is I see that there is an increase in percentage, and there is a decrease in false expected outcomes that were actually true, which is fantastic because that means that there is a direct correlation between a higher expected percentage versus a lower expected percentage. Okay, so ultimately, by me posting you guys the odds on a daily basis, or by me focusing, um, game that surprised me, Ajax versus Benfica. Yeah, no. I think Eric Ten Hag had his heart set on Man United already, so he wanted to get out of the league quickly. But that's just me as a staunch United fan. But we'll ignore that. So having a look over here, what happens is by me personally focusing in on games that have an over 80% outcome, I'm in a good stead. Because what I can see over here, and I've marked this little red line here at 30%. So if I see where it starts to dip, any game that had over 89% outcome on a specific market, you can see that we were sitting on about a 77 to almost 80% success rate. Now, if you achieve a 77 to 80% success rate, you are making some really, really, really nice cash. Okay, and that's just the facts. All right. So what happens here is if I sit by the 80% over here and I do all games like I do currently, where I do all games that have an over 80% over here, I will achieve in the region of about 72 to 73% accuracy without me doing much work. Okay, yes, I've got to do a lot of work to get this up and running, but the algorithm is identifying games successfully in order for me to place money on. Okay, now I'm going to touch a little bit more on this when we reach back next week. However, I want to show you the opposite. Okay, now this is the correct score line. Okay, now the correct score line, the chart is exactly the same. All right, and we all know how the score line works, where we do have the individual scores, and then underneath that we've got little percentages. And one thing that I always wondered was how accurate or how effective is that percentage? How effective is that percentage? Because I truly don't believe that that percentage might have too much of an effect on it. And we can see that here. It is very gradual that we can see the higher the percentage, the better chance. However, it's not fully conclusive. Okay, it really isn't. So what this basically means over here is that the scoreline percentage, and you guys will always hear me talking about the expected scoreline is this. Very rarely do I mention a specific percentage attached to the scoreline because in my own mind I've always wondered how um, is that scoreline actually a depiction on the scoreline, or is that scoreline just a depiction on the game? And what I've realized out of having a look at this graph over here is it really is a depiction on the game. Because what happens is when teams score fewer goals, there is always going to be a higher percentage chance of a nil-nils, one-nils in home team and 1-0 in away team. And there is then therefore a higher percentage attached to those goal outcomes. But it's not necessarily the actual outcomes because that is attached to the actual match outcome that is expected. Either a draw or a home win, etc. But very few goals. There may be the under 2.5 side of things. And that is what we are actually seeing over here. So what this means for me is that this is something I can work on because now I've got something that I can focus in on here and I can go, how do I physically make the goal outcomes better? Do I maybe split it away from the matches a little bit and maybe look at them in isolation? But I'm not sure yet. This is now work for me to go and have a look at. And this is great for me to see because this has highlighted maybe an issue where I can maybe better the percentages, not maybe the goal outcomes, because the goal outcomes are pretty decent, um, but I can maybe better the percentages. Okay. Now, last thing to touch on over here, what we do have over here, another question that I did have is how effective is my most likely score line versus my second most likely versus my third most likely? Okay, because if my second most likely is higher than my first most likely, and what I mean by that is the success criteria. So this is how many times that the most likely score line was actually achieved versus the second most likely versus the third most likely. And what I can see here is that there's a 12.26% that we achieved the most likely over the past year and a bit, 11% on the second most likely, and a 4% on the third most likely. All right, now this is all leagues. Okay, now what if I go and have a look at the Premier League, for example, because this one stood out to me. This one was quite an interesting one. So I'm going to filter to England. Okay, and I'm going to just filter to the Premier League. Right, now what I noticed with the Premier League is that the first most likely and second most likely were extremely, extremely close. All right, if I had to go and have a look at the League One, what I noticed is that my second most likely was the more accurate of the goal line predictions out of the lot of them. Okay, now that means that potentially there's something happening in the English League One that I need to maybe take into account specifically. So my algorithm is based on leagues in totality, and then it focuses in on the specific leagues. However, each league maybe has a little bit of a better indication that I can maybe add to that league in order to better that specific league. Now, I don't have that built in yet, but that is now on my pipeline because by looking at the data that I have here, I can truly understand, hang 10 now. I need to do something to League One because I'm seeing more goals falling into the second most likely versus the first most likely. And that's something that now that I can understand and I can see, I can fix. All right, so that is very, very, very important to be able to dig into the unique little individual leagues and see what leagues are better than others. All right. For example, if I take my match outcomes over here, and this will be the last thing that we'll touch on today, but if I do have to take my match outcomes over here today, let's see for England where my percentage actually sits. So now what you're noticing is you're noticing a little bit of a choppier graph, which is perfectly fine. It's understandable. All right. What we are seeing over here is that potentially on the 80%, as soon as a game touches on 80%, it's actually a little bit less than what I would like. Okay. However, if I look at from the Premier League side, maybe around 85% itself might be the route to have a look at from the Premier League. Okay. Now, what can I exactly do in order to better that? what can I do to make it more accurate for the Premier League? And I'm going to tell you now what I'm going to do. So I've got these graphs, and now I've got the ability to actually see um, uh, where and how the results are actually going to fit. Okay, now what I can do is I can either do one of two things. I can either reroute this back into the algorithm to learn from this. So let the algorithm say, you know what, in the past 6 months, we've achieved a 60% accuracy on Premier League, and we want to better that. So let's focus in specifically on Premier League, and they're going to make slight adjustments within the Premier League side in order to better that league. Okay, which is great because now I've got that ability, because now I can actually visually see it and I can spot the ones. The second option is that I can actually go and add a confidence meter, maybe to the website, where I can basically flag certain percentages on the website with a confidence meter to basically say, you know what, 85% for Premier League, anything above 85% mark with, very confident. Anything between 80 and 85 mark with, 50-50 or slightly confident, something like that. So there's so many different ways that I can now approach this. But without having data and without having visually represented data, it becomes very, very difficult to actually understand what we're putting out there. So just to touch on and just to finalize and finish up for this evening, just so you guys do know, we are constantly working on this and constantly making it better and tweaking and fiddling and really putting in the effort in order to make the site better, because it's only going to benefit us and it's only going to benefit you guys. All right, so I think that's a great note for us to end on. I hope you guys have learned something today. Any questions, please, like I said, drop them in the comments. If you guys haven't subscribed, please do make sure you do subscribe. But drop them in the comments, any questions, and I'll gather them all up. And next week when we meet again, I will run through it all and hopefully give you guys all the answers that you need. But I really hope that maybe you've been exposed to something new, and maybe it, um, you know, lines up to maybe something that you guys are interested in. Just to get some couple of questions here, Melvin, I see here, do you also consider team lineups before kickoff? All right, so Melvin, that's actually a very, very important question. So at this present point in time, no. And the reason why that we don't have that is simply due to the server power that we would actually need to do that. Now, what I basically mean by that is um, because lineups only get released an hour before the games, at this present point in time, the algorithm runs through and kicks up once a day. I usually run it in early hours of the morning. I kick it off manually and I just watch it and make sure everything runs through smoothly. So I kick that off once a day because that's where server power can actually take me. Now, in terms of the lineup, that is something that I really, really do want to input on here. Now, there's two ways of me doing this. Okay, and I really want to actually get the lineups because I actually want to take this down into player level, because I'm a big FPL player and I'm sure a couple of you guys are as well, and I actually want to expand this into the FPL space in terms of algorithms, in terms of expected scorers, etc. So I do have a priority to get the players in. That is really a big one because the players on the pitch obviously affect everything. The second and easier development is, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, is adding an input onto the site where you would be able to allocate, how do I put this, allocate strength ratings to a team. Now what I mean by that is, let's take Liverpool. If Salah is out from Liverpool, I would personally put the team maybe at an 8 out of 10. They're still very, very strong, but they're missing something up top there, and I wouldn't really put them in that 10 out of 10 category. Same if Liverpool, for example, were missing Van Dijk. Maybe you would say that their strength rating is a 7 because they might concede a little bit more. Now, what I was thinking is actually putting this on the website as well, by each team as well, where users can actually go and just put their input on the actual site, which would ultimately affect the score ratings. So if you see that a key player is out or there's a couple of injuries or whatever, and you claim that potentially probability-wise we can give them a strength rating of 6, that would then dim the team's percentage output on that. Now, what we would do in order to make that work is there's two ways. Either what we would do is we would store that data every time somebody had to submit a strength rating, and we would automatically populate it with an average based on everybody's inputs. Okay, so it's like a community built strength rating. The other option is just keep it to the individual who's playing around with it, where they would basically go and put in what they feel the strength rating of the team is with that. Now, that is a lot easier development, and it might be something that I might do in the meantime, because I really want to play with that as well. Or alternatively, I am looking into bringing in the players, but at the same time, if you think about it, we're running currently with 189 different leagues. Now, on a weekend, we have thousands of games in a day. Now, the server power to bring in all those individual players and scan through would be massive. So that would be a very far in the future uh, development, but it is definitely something that I really do want to get to, without doubt. So Melvin, I hope that that does help and give you an idea of where my mind is at with where I'm taking it. But yeah, really working towards bettering this on a daily basis for everybody. All right, guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys have a fantastic evening. And it sucks that it's international break. There really isn't much football on. But if you guys do, please do make sure to head on over to the website, predict-heroes.com. All the links are down in the video description as well if you guys do.